Yes, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we're going to return to Arba'in fi Usuluddin today. And what we're going to do is that we're going to go through Imam Al Ghazali's chapter on prayer. Now, I will supplement Imam Al Ghazali's chapter on prayer with what he says in Ihya Ulumuddin as well, wherever it is necessary, in order to give you like a more so refined, so to speak, introduction into Imam Al Ghazali's views on the prayer itself. So, what we're going to do is that we're going to wait a minute or two. If anyone else wants to join, we'll let them join, and then we can start, inshallah ta'ala. So, the thing with Imam Al Ghazali's reality of prayer and how he perceives the prayer to be is that he emphasizes the inward part of the prayer, as we shall see when we go through his entire chapter. And after this, we're going to go do charity. Charity is actually one of my favorite chapters in the entirety of Arba'in fi Usuluddin. And we will understand how most of us do not really know what charity even means unless we have really read some of the Sufia in their understanding of charity. But that's for obviously 2 weeks after now. So next week we're going to return to Al Maqsad Al Asna. But Imam Al Ghazali's understanding of prayer is largely an inward remembrance of God. The outward is only supposed to facilitate it. So the outward expression of the prayer is merely a facilitation of the remembrance of Allah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, establish prayer for my remembrance. So the main reason for praying is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And obviously that does not mean that the movements are not important. They are extremely important. But the movements without internal remembrance are quite useless. So, for example, even if we look at the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he talks about the Khawarij, he says that they will be speaking about the Quran in such eloquent tongues that it will put you to shame, but the Quran will not go beneath their throats, meaning it won't reach the heart. And so, such a tilawa, such a recitation is useless. Similarly, a prayer that has no connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not sought and not remembered, is a prayer that is useless. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, anyhow, without further ado, let us start and go into this. And I will try to make this as detailed as I can without overwhelming anyone. So, let us start. Begin. Yes, okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. Okay, so I'm supposed to present, right? Bro, what? Did I just forget how to do this again? Oh, yeah. Anyways, so the reality of prayer is the first chapter from the second part of Arba'in fi Usuluddin. Now, we have covered the entirety of the first part. So obviously, Arba'in fi Usuluddin is divided into 4 parts. We will go through each and every single one of them in one video. And I will supplement what Imam Al Ghazali says in Arba'in fi Usuluddin with what he says in Ihya Ulumuddin of the same chapter or the same kitab. Now, in Arba'in fi Usuluddin, he usually keeps it extremely short. The reason being he doesn't really want to overwhelm someone. And since it's a summary, he doesn't really go more into depth. But still, it's a very good chapter and it introduces you to his main ideas and the ideas of the Sufis in general of what prayer is and how one should approach Salah, prayer. So, without further ado, let us begin. So, he starts by quoting a few narrations from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and also quoting some verses from the Quran. So, the most clear verse in regards to what the prayer actually is in Quran 20, verse 40, which is established prayer for my remembrance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over here didn't say establish prayer for movement, establish prayer for reward, establish prayer for X, Y, or Z. He said establish prayer for my remembrance. So the main aim of the prayer is what? To remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remembrance is not a physical thing. So remembrance is an inward action of the heart, right? Of the qalb. So you remember someone by your heart, you do not remember someone by your tongue, right? And so the prayer is supposed to facilitate the remembrance of God. And prayer, hence, since remembering God is the highest deed, right? So as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly reminds us that we should not be heedless of Him. So how do we become heedless of him? When we do not remember him. So this is why prayer is the religion's pillar. It is the most praiseworthy of all of the ritual acts of worship. So there's nothing bigger than the prayer in terms of ritual actions. This is why on the day of judgment, the first thing we will be asked about is the prayer, not the zakat, not the hajj, the prayer. The first thing we will be asked about. And if it is correct, then everything else will be correct. So this is from a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that if prayer is correct, then everything else will be correct. And prayer has a way of removing sins from life. Because if you're remembering God properly 5 times a day, it's very inconceivable for you to be, let's say, a despicable sinner. You can still sin, but you would not be a despicable sinner because prayer has a way of making an individual righteous, because it's a remembrance of God. And the remembrance of God, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it is truly in the remembrance of God that hearts find peace. So there is nothing else that in which hearts can find peace apart from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So moving on, Imam Al Ghazali says that there are three things that a person is supposed to be vigilant in regards to the prayer. And in terms of this vigilance, the first thing is ritual purity, which is wudu and being pure. So he says know that the main objective of purifying clothes, the outer covering, and then purifying the body, the covering that is close to the heart, is to purify the heart, which is the inner seed. So the reason that we purify ourselves outwardly, the main reason for it is so that we can purify ourselves inwardly. So in reality, the cleansing of the body is supposed to signify the cleansing of the soul from all blameworthy characteristics. Now, if the ritual purity is not accompanied by a purity of the heart or by cleansing of the heart from all other sins, then that ritual purity really has no significance. So, for example, a person can do wudu and be a thief. He would still be a thief. The wudu would not remove the sin from him, right? And ritual purity is supposed to accompany this purity of the heart. Now, this does not mean that ritual purity has no effect on the heart, and the only thing that is relevant over here is the heart's cleansing. That would be a gross misunderstanding. So, just as the realities of the heart, meaning that a person's righteousness can reflect on his actions, just like that, the outer purification of the body can reflect upon the heart. So, as Imam Al Ghazali says, that as the righteousness of the heart can descend upon the body, just like that, the righteousness of the body and the purity of the body can ascend to the heart. This is why you prepare yourself. So, whenever you're about to do something, you prepare yourself. You take proper caring and you take proper, let's say, precautions in order to prepare yourself for a particular act. So, the ritual purity is like that. You're preparing yourself for inner purity and you're preparing yourself for prayer. So it is the same thing with the Quran. No one touches it unless they are pure, right? Unless they are cleansed. Now, obviously, this does refer to outer purity. You are supposed to have a wudu while you're touching the Quran. But even apart from that, it also refers to inner purity. So, for example, if a person has outer purity, but he's a despicable individual, does he become worthy of touching the Quran? Of course not. So, as you would see throughout Imam Al Ghazali's work, that for him there is a connection between the outer and the inner, right? So, unlike some people uh, who only value the outer, and some people who only value the inner, Imam Al Ghazali and the Sunnis in general, they bridge both of them together, right? So, the outer is just as important as the inner. And without the outer, the inner is actually it's not attainable. So a person can't go and pray without ritual purity, even though the main thing that is sought is inner cleansing, but it is sought through the channels that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed you to seek it through. And so if you forgo those channels and you try to seek inner cleansing by your own self, then that is actually the opposite of righteousness. That is unrighteous, that is sinful, that is actually despicable. And so the outer can never be neglected. But the point over here that is being made is that the outer is supposed to signify what is supposed to occur in the inner. So you cleanse yourself from your outer body, your clothes, your body, and that is supposed to cleanse yourself of the inner sins that you have, the blameworthy characteristics, the unrighteousness, the thoughts, all of these different things. So that is what it means to be vigilant regarding ritual purity. And Imam Al Ghazali is actually very explicit over here. He means not only that a person is supposed to be ritually pure when he's doing the prayer, he also means that a person is supposed to do all of the recommended acts of ritual purity. So it's not that a person just does the obligatory acts and does the minimum of ritual purity. He should do all of the recommended acts by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because for Imam Al Ghazali, all of them carry deep meaning and they have deep effects on the heart. So, as we talked about previously, right, that just like the righteousness of the body reflects in its acts, the righteousness of the heart reflects in its acts. Just like that, ritual purity can ascend to the heart and change it and affect it. So, all of the things that are sunnah in the wudu are therefore very necessary if a person wants to attain purity, rather than just purity that is enough, right? So moving on, that is the first part that a person must be vigilant in. So the second is acts. So the first part, which requires vigilance, is ritual purity. The second part that requires purity and vigilance is acts. So Imam Al Ghazali explains this by saying the second matter is to be vigilant about the prayer's recommended acts, outer practices, remembrances, and glorifications. You should perform it with all the recommended acts, etiquettes, and positions. In summary, know that the prayer has a form made by the Lord of Lords, just as He formed animals. For example, its spirit is intention, sincerity, presence of heart, its body is action, its origins are pillars, and its limbs are the emphatically recommended acts. So, a way to make you understand this is that the beginning act of the prayer is that we turn ourselves away from all different directions and we face the Qibla, right? So if we are looking at east or west or whatsoever, we are supposed to orient ourselves towards the Kaaba and then we are supposed to pray. Now, the question is very simple, and Imam Al Ghazali talks about this in a more so detailed manner in Ihya Ulumuddin, which is that do you seriously think that the only thing that is required of you is to remove your face from different directions and face the Qibla, and not to remove your heart from all different directions and face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? For that is what it signifies, that you have removed yourself from all different directions of the outward of the outer world, and you have faced the house of God, right? The Qibla, the Kaaba. But that is only part of it. In reality, what this is supposed to signify is that you have changed your direction, the direction of your heart, your thoughts, and your mind from every other direction apart from God, and you have went towards God. So you're preparing yourself. So just as you remove yourself from the directions of the world, you remove your heart from the directions of other than God, and you face only God. So that is the sincerity and the presence of the heart that is sought for the actions. Now, a person is supposed to be present throughout his prayer. So it's not really something that is acceptable in the mind of Imam Al Ghazali, that a person just starts, says Allahu Akbar, goes into the prayer, and that's enough. For Imam Al Ghazali, such a prayer has no benefit. Now, it does avoid sin. So, as the fiqh scholars say, he even mentions this in his book on prayer in Ihya Ulumuddin, that the ulama of fiqh, so the jurists, they say that what is required in order for a prayer to be valid is that a person is present while he's saying takbir. So he knows what he's saying, right? And he knows he's saying Allahu Akbar, and then he goes and he starts the standing position. But for Imam Al Ghazali, if a person only does this prayer, though valid, so he's not saying that it's not valid, but it bears no benefit to him. On the day of judgment, it's not something that will be rewarded, because for the rest of the duration of the prayer, his mind was somewhere else, right? And there's even a beautiful hadith in regards to this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when the son of Adam is performing the prayer and his attention is towards me, so his heart is towards me. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking. It's a hadith Qudsi. So his heart is towards me, so then I am inclined towards him. But when he turns his face, I turn my face. So meaning when he remembers anything other than me during the prayer, so then I stop inclining towards him. So the meaning of this prayer, this hadith, reflects this reality, that a person is supposed to be focused solely and purely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whenever he turns his face away, right? Whenever he looks at something else, whenever he thinks of something else, whenever his heart inclines towards something else, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks away from him. Because the prayer is supposed to do what? To remember Allah. And so if you're not remembering Allah, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you the pleasure of turning towards you, right? Now, the turning towards over here means qurba, so coming close to you, right? It does not mean any sort of directional, let's say, proximity. So he's turning towards you, meaning he's coming close to you, right? You're attaining qurba, you're getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you look away or when you think about something apart from God during the prayer, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stops inclining towards you. He stops turning towards you. And that connection and that qurba, closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is lost. So the acts are only as good as what they're supposed to indicate, which is intention, sincerity, and presence of heart. Now, one of the examples that Imam Al Ghazali gives over here is that imagine that there is a sultan, right? So there's a ruler, and you offer a beautiful woman to this ruler for marriage, right? Now, the ruler will only reward you if the woman is indeed beautiful. But now imagine that the woman that you gave the ruler, she doesn't have an eye, she doesn't have an ear, she's deaf, right? She's ugly, and this and that. Will the ruler give you anything in return? He probably would punish you. And so this is how Imam Al Ghazali conceives of the prayer, that it is offering a beautiful gift to God, right? And if it does not have the extra recommended acts, then you have already removed the beauty from it. And then if there is no remembrance in it, then you've left it without limbs. You've left it without sight. You've left it deaf. And so if you offer such a prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do you seriously think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for that? And he'll think anything of that gift? Of course not. And so, just as with the analogy of the king, when you present a gift to someone that is mighty, and there is no one that is mightier than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is no one that has more right on you than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, our prayers, no matter how perfect they get, they can never do justice to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you offer a prayer that is mutilated, so to speak, it has no recommended acts in it, your heart is somewhere else, your body is not reflecting what your mouth is saying, your heart is not reflecting what your mouth is saying, then such a prayer in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should actually invoke his wrath on you, right? It's not something that is good. It's not something that is worthy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so even if we do all of these things, our prayer is still not worthy of him. And this is why we say after the prayer, astaghfirullah. So why do we say astaghfirullah after the prayer? The reason that we say it is because our prayer is not worthy of Allah, no matter how good we perform it. He's the Lord of the worlds. It's not possible for us to perform a prayer that fulfills his rights on us, right? And this also refers to all of the acts. So all of the acts are supposed to be followed by acts of the heart. And this is something that we will talk about in the next understanding of Imam Al Ghazali. But if the prayers, if the acts do not impart the same sort of meaning that the words say onto the heart, then you will not attain any benefit from the prayer. So imagine a person who is in front of another individual, who's in front of his father, or even in our own experiences, we know when a person is saying something but he doesn't mean it, right? And that hurts us more than him saying the opposite. So if a person was to tell us that they hate us and we know that he means it, sure, we would dislike it. But if a person says that they love us but he doesn't mean it, yeah, that would hurt us far more. And so that is how the acts are. So many of the times we do the acts, we say the words, but we don't really mean them, do we? So we are saying the words just like a robot says something. There is no soul in it. There is nothing of value in it. Our mind is somewhere else, whereas our tongue says something else. And so how does the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which it is said that the Quran will not go below their throats, how does it not apply to us? The prayer doesn't go below our throats, does it? So that is what Imam Al Ghazali is signifying over here, that the acts are supposed to bring the presence of the body, and every act, even in the outer sense, every single act should be performed to its perfection, as much as it is possible for human beings to perform acts to their perfection. So you're not supposed to be just standing over here and your head going like this. You're supposed to be vigilant with every single one of your actions. They're supposed to be perfect. So imagine if you were to be told that you need to perform an act and you would be given countless treasures in return for performing the act. But you have to perform that vigilantly. Obviously, you would perform it vigilantly, right? But the prayer has far greater of a reward than any treasure that you can get in the dunya. So why would you not perform it vigilantly? The reason is that sometimes Imam Al Ghazali refers to this is that this is shock. So individuals do not really believe in the akhirah, and that is why they say that they do believe in it, but their actions and their hearts do not really reflect it, and that is why they slack when they are doing ritual actions, because their heart is not certain, there is no yaqeen in them that they will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after they die. So it's a form of hypocrisy. So anyways, Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anyways, moving forward to the third. Now, this is the spirit of the prayer. And this is the third thing that you must be vigilant regarding. So, Imam Al Ghazali says the third matter is to be vigilant regarding the spirit of the prayer, which means having sincerity, presence of heart throughout its entirety, for the heart to take on the qualities of the prayer's inner meanings during the act. Therefore, do not prostrate or bow except that your heart is submissive and humble, in agreement with your outer condition. For verily, the intent of the prayer is humility of the heart, not humility of the body. So the prayer is not designed to make you humble only in your body. It is designed to make you humble in your heart. So why do we do sujood? So sujood is the ultimate act of submission. So if you were to be asked to do sujood in front of anyone apart from God, obviously it's haram, but you would not do it anyway because it's humiliating, right? It is considering another so above you that you put your head onto the ground. Now that is the meaning of the sujood, that you're submitting completely and utterly in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you're acknowledging his lordship over you. And if those meanings are not found in the heart while you're doing the sujood, then what value does the sujood bring you? Is it something that is supposed to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is he supposed to reward you for this? For a sujood that lacks all heart, for a sujood that lacks all of the meanings? So when you stand up and you say Allahu Akbar, when your heart has something other than Allah, how is that Allahu Akbar justified? Does Allahu Akbar not mean that Allah is the greatest? So why, when you say it, there is something else in your heart apart from God? You have not internalized the meaning. The meaning is that Allah is the greatest, and therefore your heart does not turn to anything else because He is the greatest. When you have something of immense value in front of you, you do not look at something else. So imagine you love gold, right, or diamond, or any sort of worldly thing, and it is in front of you in its greatest extent. Would you look at somewhere else? Would you think about something else? So when you say Allah is the greatest, you're not supposed to be thinking about someone else. You're not supposed to be turning your head somewhere else. You're not supposed to be thinking about or showing in your heart anyone else that is greater than Allah. And so if you do, then this is a minor form of disbelief, is it not? That you're saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest, but in your heart there are things that you value more than him, and you think more about him. And this is a general point, but it applies over here as to the prayer as well. That then have you not really disbelieved in what your tongue has said? For your heart surely does not reflect it. And it also goes into all of the different movements and all of the different sayings. So, for example, when you say "Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in," that it is only you that we seek for help, that you're supposed to show humility. Your heart is supposed to sink in out of your helplessness, because it's a prayer of helplessness, right? The Fatiha. And specifically in those verses, you are showing that you are helpless in front of God, and it is indeed that you are in complete need of His help. Now, while you're saying that and you feel completely fine, right? There is no sense of humbleness in you. There is no sense of dread in you. There is no sense of being needy in you. Then are you not just saying something that you don't believe? Because if you believed it, surely it would reflect onto your heart, would it not? And that is the main point that Imam Al Ghazali is making over here. For verily, the intent of the prayer is humility of the heart, not humility of the body. And similarly, when you bow down and when you do the tashaddud, when you do the sujood, all of it is supposed to reflect upon your inner being, right? The meanings that it signifies is supposed to be declared by your heart. Because if you perform it only by the body, then it's an act of hypocrisy, actually, like as clear as hypocrisy can be. So for Imam Al Ghazali, it is impossible for a person to perform an act of prayer in which his heart is absent and still be rewarded for it. Because the prayer is supposed to do what? Make you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So moving forward, he says that persevere with yourself in returning your heart to the prayer until you are not heedless from it's only recorded as having performed that part of the prayer which he is conscious of. So if you are heedless, then you will only be recorded as performing the part of the prayer in which you were conscious. So as we say that the ulama say that the only thing that makes the prayer valid is being conscious while you're saying the takbir. But in the sight of Allah, you will only be recorded for saying the takbir, not for performing the prayer, because you were not conscious of it, right? And as Imam Al Ghazali says, that those people who perform the prayer like this, that they only say the takbir and then their mind wanders, then these individuals are only doing the prayer to remove the sword from their neck, meaning the sword of the akhirah. So on the day of judgment, they can say, oh, well, we performed the prayer. It is to remove the consequences of not performing the prayer, almost like a complete and utter hypocrisy. And that's definitely what Imam Al Ghazali perceives of it. So, if presence of the mind, you are being another way, I think I missed some of the sentences over here. Then bear in mind the following: if the heedlessness persists for the duration of the two units of the prayer, rakatan, then do not repeat it. However, understand that supererogatory prayer mends the obligatory prayers. So, what he's trying to say over here is that is trying to give you a suggestion of what to do if you are heedless. So, the suggestion over here is that if you are heedless in your outer performing of the actions and in your inner self while you're doing the prayer, so let's say you're doing the Fajr prayer, which is of 2 rakah, then while if you are heedless in it, then you should perform nawafil of 8 rakahs, and you should train yourself to be conscious during the prayer. And if you can do that in those 8 nawafil, then you will be conscious during the obligatory prayer, which is the Fajr in this case. And this is why he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted this ummah a mercy in which he mends what is left of the obligatory prayers by those which are performed additionally to them, like the nawafil, the supererogatory prayers. So this is actually, there's a hadith of this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if anything is lacking in the obligatory prayer, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at the supererogatory prayers to find something that fills it up, right? Find something that mends it. So if you are indeed heedless during your prayers of the obligatory prayers, then you should perform as many nawafil as you can to make yourself habitually inclined towards performing these actions of the heart while you're performing the actions of ritual purity and the actions of acts and the actions of the sayings while you're in the prayer. So this is why supererogatory prayers are emphasized, because none of our prayers are truly perfect. And so, since they are not perfect, that which are imperfections in them and defects in them, these are covered by the additional prayers that we perform aside from the obligatory prayers. So, this was actually a very short chapter from Imam Al Ghazali on the prayer in specific. And so, the main takeaway from this is that the prayer is supposed to be an inward worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The outward is supposed to facilitate the inward. All of the ritual purity is supposed to cleanse oneself of all things apart from God and cleanse oneself from all blameworthy characteristics, so that a person goes into the prayer pure, not pure only in his actions, not pure only in his outer self, but pure in his heart. A heart that turns only towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a heart that conceives only of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a heart that has turned away from all different distractions and focused solely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what it is supposed to do. Then when a person is performing his actions, the actions are supposed to show this very reality. So when he looks at the Qibla, when he turns away from all other directions of the dunya, he turns away from all different remembrances apart from God. He turns away from every single thing that he remembers apart from God, and he focuses solely upon God. For otherwise, turning towards the Qibla and not turning away from all other things apart from God would be hypocrisy, because the action that you are performing is not reflected inside of you. And if it is not reflected inside of you, then it is indeed a hypocritical action. And to conceive that you're going to be given any reward for it would be quite folly. And similarly, when you say Allahu Akbar, there is not supposed to be anything greater in your heart than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For if there is something greater than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your heart while you do say Allahu Akbar, then have you not disbelieved in saying Allahu Akbar? Have you not disbelieved that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest? So if you truly believed it, there would be nothing in your heart greater than him. There would be no other distraction in your heart apart from him. For even having something else in your heart while you're saying Allahu Akbar already means that you do not believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest. Now, this does not, the harsh words over here used is not to say that a person has fell into disbelief. So that's not what is being argued over here. It is talking about hidden inaccuracies and hidden failings of the heart. And so these words are supposed to tell you or how severe such a hidden defect is. And many times you don't even realize it, right? So mostly when we're performing the prayer and we say Allahu Akbar, we don't even realize that this means that we believe that there is nothing greater than Allah. And so, if we believe that, why should anything else occur to our thought? Why should anything else occur to our mind, right? And the prayer is to remember Him. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, establish the prayer for my remembrance. How are you remembering Him when you're saying words of praise from your mouth and it doesn't reflect in your heart, right? Is that not hypocrisy? Is that not the opposite of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And as we mentioned the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that as long as he's looking at my direction, the person, while he's performing the prayer, then I look towards him. But when he turns away, then I turn away, right? So what this means, obviously, is that a person, as long as he is truly turned towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his inner self, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is turned towards him. But when his mind wanders, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turns away, right? Because he's not performing the prayer as it is supposed to be. And this reflects in all of the things that you say during the prayer. As Imam Al Ghazali mentioned, the incident of saying, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, that is supposed to make you humble. That is supposed to show you your helplessness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That it is only you who we seek for help, meaning that no one else can help us. And we are in need of you, right? That's what it means. So, is your heart not supposed to be taken up by dread at that moment that you're completely and utterly helpless? You're not supposed to incline towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a man, as a beggar, begging for his mercy and for his help. That is what's supposed to be occurring inside of you. And if that is not occurring inside of you, then the opposite is true, is it not? That you're saying that we seek only your help and we are only in need of your help, but you do not display it. So you're denying that you're in need of his help, and you're also denying that you seek it, right? If you're not performing the inward actions while you're saying that. So is that not hypocrisy? Is that not a hidden form of disbelief, that you're disbelieving in the statement that you're saying? So again, this is not to mean actual disbelief. It's a term used. The term used is I apologize. The term used is hidden disbelief. So it's hidden kufr. So meaning what you're saying from the tongue, you're not really performing the actions of it by the heart, and you're not internalizing the meaning of it in the heart itself, right? So that is what it is supposed to mean. So this was our chapter on Imam Al Ghazali elucidations on the prayer, the salah. So if you guys have any questions, do go ahead. And since we have completed it, it was a short chapter, but I want to give every single chapter its haq, so to speak, give it its due, so everyone can understand one chapter at a time rather than us juggling two different, let's say, chapters in two different concepts. So if you have any questions regarding what I have said about the prayer, of any questions of Imam Al Ghazali's conception regarding the prayer, of anything that has been said over here, do go ahead and ask it, inshallah ta'ala. So, MashaAllah, it seems like I gave such a beautiful explanation that no one has a question. So next, we will be covering charity from Imam Al Ghazali's Arba'in fi Usul. This will occur 2 weeks later. So next week we're gonna go back to Al Maqsad Al Asna, and in the following week, then we're gonna do charity. So these are going to be short chapters, so they're not going to be long, and you guys can watch them easily on relapse. So I think probably for every chapter we would have 40 minutes. But for the chapter of remembrance, it would probably be hour, 1.5 hour long, because Imam Al Ghazali talks about fana in it. So we will explore how he conceives of it. the state of annihilation of the self. And also talking about the Quran, that is also a lengthy chapter. Not lengthy in its content, but lengthy in what you have to explain of it, because it's a very eloquent chapter. But anyhow, we will be returning to Arba'in fi Suluddin 2 weeks later, Thursday, and we will be talking about charity. What does charity mean in the inward? Not the outward, but in the inward, what does it mean? Right? And that is what we will be returning to 2 weeks later. But until then, this is all that I have for you in regards to the prayer. There's also a video I've done on the prayer itself, largely said the same points. You can find it on my channel, inshallah. And if some of you are more so interested in what Imam Al Ghazali says about the prayer in Ihya Ulumuddin in specific, then that video is video is only based upon Ihya Ulumuddin, not on Arba'in fi Suluddin. So you can watch that. But if you do not have any questions, then I will take my leave. Do let me know if you have any questions. I'll wait a moment or two to see if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, we're going to be stopping this, inshallah. So these are going to be short now because I want to give every single chapter its due. So therefore, we're going to take it slowly and short as because most of these explanations do not require me to say anything more than this. Okay, doesn't seem like there are any questions. So, inshallah, then I think I will be taking my leave and we can continue this next week with 5 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from Al Maqsad Al Asna. Now, I wanted that if you guys were actually serious about this, from the people who told me to start this, that I would give you some homework and that you would explain what you had learned from like the different chapters of Arba'in fi Suluddin and how you're going to apply that in your life. But since you guys are not really, well, not you guys, but meaning the people who told me to do this, I believe 180 people wanted to be in the group, right? But four are over here. So uh, I don't think that I will be giving any sort of, let's say, homework. And this should be enough. And we'll continue this next week, inshallah ta'ala. And I think perhaps we might do something special for Ramadan. I might cover Riyadat al-Nafs for Ramadan, or maybe Imam Al Ghazali's book on how to interact with the Quran. Perhaps I will do that to give you something special for Ramadan, but I don't know about that yet because my schedule is pretty packed. But anyways, it was a pleasure telling you about Imam Al Ghazali's elucidations on the prayer, the inward meanings of the prayer, how one should interact with the prayer, and how one should deal with the prayer, what the prayer signifies, and what the prayer ought to bring in a man. So, but with that said, and since there are no questions, I will be taking my leave, inshallah ta'ala, and I'll see you next week, Thursday, 10 p.m. We will continue with Al Maqsad Al Asna. But until then, this is all I have for you. Stay faithful, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.